The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Thom Hartmann here for Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is a vital part of our media infrastructure. You've heard me say it a million times. I'll say it again. There is such a lack of good, clean, honest reporting and commentary in the American media scene because all of our corporate media has gone to a exclusively for-profit infotainment model rather than the old nonprofit news model that existed pre-1987 when Reagan ended the Fairness Doctrine. Before 1987, news agencies typically lost money for their parent companies because the news was the price of the station license. Now they all make money. Les Moonves famously said, Donald Trump may be terrible for America, but he sure is great for CBS. I'm paraphrasing from memory, but words to that effect, as you'll recall. He was the president of CBS, or the CEO, or whatever his title is. And this has created a real mess for all of us, trying to understand what's going on in the world, because all the news is either sports, who's ahead, who's behind, or drama, who's agonizing, and or who's happy, or who's winning, who's losing, that kind of stuff. Rather than what are the issues, what do they mean, how will they affect your life? If you want to know those things, you have to come to Free Speech TV, which is, unfortunate in a large sense for the United States. I mean, I would love to see the rest of America actually having news. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool that we've got this little corner of the media universe here in the United States that presents good, solid, vetted, fact-checked, real news. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and help out Free Speech TV. This is it's a really important time. And I mean, not that there haven't been other important times. And I noticed we brought in, as I recall, around $3,000 on Monday and around $5,000 on Tuesday. Typically, we shoot for $10,000 a day and usually hit around $8,000. So we're way down. I'm guessing that's probably because a lot of you have been chipping in to help people with the hurricanes and the floods and the wildfires and everything else. I mean, there's so many needs out there. I honor that. But that said, Free Speech TV is an important thing too. We have a set of premiums for your gifts. With an $80 gift, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and Ben Cohen's anti-Big Pharma money stamp. With a $120 gift, you get Mike Papantonio's new legal thriller, Law and Vengeance, along with the water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. With a $240 gift, you get 2 books. This is They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. With a $360 gift, you get 3 books. You get Law and Vengeance, you get They Thought They Were Free, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and anti-pharma stamp. Anti-pharma, yeah, and plus you get an autographed copy of my book, Unequal Protection. That's with a $360 gift. With a $480 gift, you get Nancy McLean's book. This is just an absolutely amazing book, Democracy in Chains. It is, in my opinion, one of the best books that's been written this year. It's about the right wing and how they've basically, the corporate right wing, the billionaire right wing, and how they have risen up and essentially taken over our government at levels from local all the way up to federal. and it's really remarkable. So you get that book, plus you get the other 3 books: On Equal Protection by me, They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. Plus you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. And with a $1,000 gift, we'll figure out a way to get together for lunch. Louise and I are going to be spending, much of our time, some of our time in Portland, some of our time here in D.C. So, we'll work it out. But that's with a $1,000 gift. Maybe you want to come to Portland. I mean, it's a beautiful town. If you'd like to visit Portland, here's your excuse. So that's that. Those are the goodies essentially that we're offering at those price point levels. But you can donate anything. I mean, if $80 is too high a lift for you, you can call up and make a $10 donation right now, and just to help the network. That's a good and noble thing. Operators are standing by, as they say. And in fact, it may not even be operators. It may be people who work at Free Speech TV who are answering the phone for you. The number is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And, please call now. This is just such an important network to keep going. And it does cost money to get the electrons, to provide the lights, to send this image to you up to the, we have to send it from here to Denver, and then Denver up to the satellite, and then the satellites, both Dish and Direct and off to cable systems, they pull it off the satellite too. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay, when we talk on the telephone, and when you pick up your phone, you're not yet on TV, but you're live. But it's just an amazing thing, but it costs money. So please call now and help out. Thank you so much.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Thom Hartmann Program. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Tom. It is a Friday, the end of another action-packed week. We'll get to that in a second. By the way, if you don't know me, I'm the host of the Zero Hour on We Act Radio. You can go to thisisthezerohour.com and find out more about that. I'm also a writer, and I try to stay out of trouble, and I don't do very well at that final task. Now, as I said, we had, of course, an action-packed week this week. What other kind of week have we been having lately except an action-packed week? So, of course, we're going to get to some of the news stories. But first, I don't know if you feel the way I do, but it seems to me that since Donald Trump got elected, the news cycle has accelerated to a frenetic pace. It was always a fast-paced culture that we live in, but the news stories are breaking so often, so fast, so furious, in this case, literally furious when it comes to Trump and his white nationalist followers, that sometimes I have to wonder whether we can even keep pace with it, whether we can even absorb all the information that's being thrown our way. So before we get to the news events of recent cycles, I want to step out of the pace of current events and look backwards in history for a feature I'm going to call the Mystery Leftist. This is going to be a pop quiz for listeners of the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm going to offer 2 or 3 quotes from a mystery troublemaker of past history and give you a few minutes to tell me who you think it might be. Obviously, we're not taking calls in this segment, but you can tweet it at us or do whatever you want, or just say it in your mind and perhaps we'll hear it. Okay, Mystery Leftist said this: labor is the great source from which nearly all, if not all, human comforts and necessities are drawn. Now, while you ponder that quote, bear in mind that labor itself, meaning organized labor, labor unions, are once again rising in popularity. There was a time in this country not so long ago when most working, or a large number of working people, belonged to labor unions. Now, outside of the government sector, only about 7% of the working population belongs to a union. That number was much higher in the 1960s, and wages were much higher in the 1960s. Benefits were improving in the 1960s. Inequality was much lower. Those things are very much related. Now, labor came in for some unpopularity, especially after the 1990s, when Democrats worked very hard to distance themselves from labor and seemed to be echoing the kind of rhetoric of the Republicans. In fact, definitely did echo the rhetoric of the Republicans in saying that that labor was a quote-unquote special interest. Well, I'm sorry. The interests of a majority of Americans, a vast majority of Americans, who are wage earners and working people in their everyday lives, is not a special interest. That's us as a people. A special interest is a small minority that tries to manipulate the system for their own selfish benefit. So, who is this mystery leftist of which I speak? Second quote, labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves much higher consideration. Wow. Who is this commie? I'll get to that in another minute. But while we talk about the need for organized labor in this country, let us remember that during the prior administration, there was a time when Democrats had majorities in both houses of Congress and conceivably could have passed the Employee Free Choice Act. They chose not to do so. That is, in my mind, a horrendous oversight. Now, let us go to the third quote from our mystery troublemaker. Third quote goes as follows. If at any time all labor should cease, at the end of a single year, there could scarcely be one human being alive. All would have perished for want of substance. Now, again, who is our mystery leftist? Well, let's think about the way we treat working people in this country, particularly if they are immigrants. There was a story in the paper recently about working people in the Texas area who did not come to this country with the proper documentation. The headline was, if they deport all of us, who will rebuild? Quote unquote, undocumented workers could be the key to Texas recovery. The premise of this article, which was, on the one hand, kind of liberal-minded because it talked about the plight of undocumented workers in the Houston area. But the whole premise of it was we need undocumented workers because nobody else will do this work. And therefore, we should not keep deporting undocumented workers until Houston is rebuilt. In fact, this article, if I can find it here, it quotes the head of the Houston Contractors Association saying if they would relax the rules, meaning, of course, stop deporting people, honestly, that would be great. We could use it. That's Jeffrey Nielsen, Executive Vice President of the Houston Contractors Association. He said every member of the association, even before Hurricane Harvey, was grappling with a shortage of workers. Now they're really short of workers. He went on to say, the truth is there are not a lot of people jumping up and down to do civil construction work in Texas. It's hot, and these jobs are pouring concrete or worse, hot asphalt. That's the reality of it. We need more people than ever. So basically, the whole premise of this article seems to be, well, we've got to stop deporting people until they've done the heavy lifting and hard work to rebuild Houston. And when that is done, we'll kick them out. Now, the same attitude was present in an article about Saratoga, New York. Headline in the Albany Times-Union, track worker, the headline is ICE returns, that's the immigration enforcers, ICE returns to Saratoga, arresting 8 from Mexico. Now, why did this suddenly start to happen again? Apparently there had been a moratorium. Nobody had been arrested and facing deportation as an undocumented worker in Saratoga for a while. Why did it start again? Because racetrack season was over. So Again, disposable workers, working people who helped Saratoga profit from the racing season, and as soon as it was over, kick them out. Now they want workers to rebuild Houston and then kick them out. That is a heartless, ruthless, horrible way to look at working people. It is inhuman. It is immoral. It is labor serving the interests of capital rather than the other way around. Do I sound like a communist? Do I sound like a subversive? Does my mystery leftist sound like a communist? Does he sound like a subversive? Does he sound like an un-American person who every school child in this country should condemn and be taught to condemn with every breath? Perhaps. His name, Abraham Lincoln. There was a time in this country not so long ago when politicians of both parties were willing and able to say that working people in this country deserve a fair shake. Take a look sometime at the 1956 party platform for the Republican Party. That's right, Dwight D. Eisenhower's Republican Party. That party platform celebrates working people. It does so. Now, I don't agree with the Eisenhower Republicans' economic ideology, but even they were more than willing, and of course they're moderate by today's Republican standards, but they were more than willing, for example, to brag about the fact that during President Eisenhower's first administration, 1 million more people joined unions. That was bragged about in the Republican Party platform. Can you imagine a Democrat of today? Now, the Democratic Party is changing, and we're going to be talking about that on this show. But can you imagine a Democrat of the last 20 years bragging that union membership went up while they were president? No. But it's time for that to start happening again. If Dwight D. Eisenhower can brag about it, Democrats should most certainly brag about it. Now, the Dwight D. Eisenhower Republican Party platform also bragged that 2 million people were added to Social Security. That's right, Social Security was expanded during Dwight D. Eisenhower's first administration. We need a party that will fight for those things today, that will fight to increase the number of working people who belong to unions, that will fight for better wages and benefits for working people, that will fight to get more people on Social Security, or to, and better yet, in today's day and age, or I should say even better, to increase Social Security's benefits, which are inadequate to meet people's needs. You know, when you compare Social Security benefits in this country to comparable programs in other developed countries, we're close to the bottom of the list. That should be unacceptable. And to those of us like my mystery troublemaker, President Abraham Lincoln, I suspect it would be absolutely unacceptable. So as we prepare to go to our first break, think about this. If it was okay for Abraham Lincoln to say it, why isn't it okay for the political leaders of today to say it? If it was okay for Dwight D. Eisenhower to say it, why is it considered extreme for Democrats of today to say it? And then consider the wisdom as well as the heroism of the Democrats we will be talking about later in this show, who signed on to Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill. We will be talking about that a lot, not only because it is a good bill, but because it is a sign, a portent, a symbol of what government can and should do for its people. Democrats shouldn't be embarrassed about the power of government to make people's lives better. They should be proud of it. We will be right back after this. I'm Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back after this. This is Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Thom. let's take a few calls right now just to see what people are thinking. We got Jim from Austin, Texas, has some thoughts on the Abraham Lincoln quote. So let's see if I can make this thing work. Jim, are you with us? I don't think he is. Oh, I have to click on the number, you know. Jim, or I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong person, but what the heck? John, as long as I got you, you didn't want to talk about Abraham Lincoln, you wanted to talk about identity politics. What's up?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about identity politics in relation to another program. And, you know, I know the person isn't here to defend themselves, but I was banned this morning from Stephanie Miller for, you know, referring to identity politics as being a way of separating people, and that sexism and racism are a product of neoliberalism, and many intellectuals, many black intellectuals and people in black studies have the facts and figures to prove that. And, you know, I probably was a little bit snotty, you know, because I was questioned right off the bat. And I said, well, are you talking in a code when I mentioned neoliberalism? You know, as if the people that listen to Free Speech TV haven't heard it before. Anybody that listens to Free Speech TV understands that language. Anyone that listens to Thom Hartmann understands that language. I realize they have the same producers, but they're quite different shows. That's neither here nor there. But I do think.
Well, let me get a couple thoughts in there, John, because you have a lot of thoughts that I want to respond to. Number one, I would put that a little differently. I would say that that identity politics is very important, but it is inseparable from the politics of economics, and that those who would pretend that they're separate issues and use identity politics to suppress discussion of, for example, economic inequality, they may be they tend to be corporate-funded politicians that I do not support or sympathize with. But I think it's important, and I think you are absolutely right that there is an interconnectedness between the two issues. There's no question about that in my mind or in the minds of many brilliant intellectuals. I think that Malcolm X would have found it inconceivable, since he fought for economic independence, to separate identity politics from economic politics. Martin Luther King Jr. was a self-declared socialist. He said, Dr. King said, what is the point of integrating a lunch counter if we can't afford a hamburger at that lunch counter? So Martin Luther King would agree that identity politics and economic politics are inseparable and that we must fight for both of them together. They are natural allies. They are inseparable from one another. And in fact, those who would divide us on that basis should be resisted, and that's my opinion, and I suspect it's close to yours. I think we're going to go to break now, so we will be back after this. Okay, well, I guess we're not going to break now. Do we have time for another call? Not quite time for another call. Now, I do have a couple calls about the Abraham Lincoln, and, you know, we'll get to that at some point as soon as we can. But I think it's also important to finish stretching, which is candidly what I was doing right there. Okay, so we will be right back after this. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann. How many minutes? Hey, so this is Richard R.J. Eskow. We're back sitting in for Thom, and I'm going to take a real quick call. You think I have time for a real quick call? All right, so caller Jim, just a heads up before we start talking, man. This is going to be quick, and but I want your thoughts on Abraham Lincoln. Jim, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that's an excellent example and brings historical perspective to what has happened in labor and what's happened to our economy, because there's a rather narrow view that the United States was founded basically on a capital perspective, and Lincoln's illustrating that, going way back into one of our greatest president, that there's a great deal of concern for labor.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I agree with that. I think you can look at American history as being the American Revolution. We didn't really have the left-right paradigm when the American Revolution took place. So that I've been reading a lot about the American Revolution lately. That was more of a social equality fight, and there was a tremendous shift in culture and society in the United States, new United States and Europe, around the idea that all people are equal, that, the aristocracy was not a reflection of God's will for humanity, and that was a social revolution of a massive order. Now I think we're getting to the point where in the last 150 years, it's been a social and economic revolution that needs to take place on an ongoing basis so that everybody has a role to play in society. Now, both of these struggles, as we talked about earlier, they're ongoing and they're interconnected. But, when Thomas Jefferson talked about a revolution every 20 years, now he talked about watering the tree of liberty with the blood of martyrs. I think history has moved beyond that. I think we've developed democratic institutions that, if we use them and we demand that they be used, will do the job for us without violence. I think we can be nonviolent now in our revolutions. But I think the idea that periodically we need to refresh the tree of liberty with a real revolutionary spirit towards both social equality and economic equality, I think that's the spirit we need, and I think we need it more than ever right now, because look, we're not going to reverse climate change without overthrowing the dominance of global predatory capitalism. That's just a fact. And we're not going to really save the planet without it. We're not going to heal the divisions in society that have young black boys and girls shot down on the street, or grown black men and women shot down in the street. We're not going to stop that without a social revolution of equal magnitude. It's a matter of life and death. And it is our calling and our mission as people who want a better society to address these crises and to address them with something that I would describe as a revolutionary spirit. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about what the revolutionary spirit ought to look like as we move forward with the Thom Hartmann Show. But I'll tell you one thing, it's going to have to be something we all really believe in. Our elected officials aren't going to do it for us. We're going to have to do it for them. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann, and we will be right back after this in a few minutes.
Thom Hartmann here for Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is a vital part of our media infrastructure. You've heard me say it a million times. I'll say it again. There is such a lack of good, clean, honest reporting and commentary in the American media scene because all of our corporate media has gone to a exclusively for-profit infotainment model rather than the old nonprofit news model that existed pre-1987 when Reagan ended the Fairness Doctrine. Before 1987, news agencies typically lost money for their parent companies because the news was the price of the station license. Now they all make money. Les Moonves famously said, Donald Trump may be terrible for America, but he sure is great for CBS. I'm paraphrasing from memory, but words to that effect, as you'll recall. He was the president of CBS, or the CEO, or whatever his title is. And this has created a real mess for all of us, trying to understand what's going on in the world, because all the news is either sports, who's ahead, who's behind, or drama, who's agonizing, and or who's happy, or who's winning, who's losing, that kind of stuff, rather than what are the issues, what do they mean, how will they affect your life. If you want to know those things, you have to come to Free Speech TV, which is, unfortunate in a large sense for the United States. I mean, I would love to see the rest of America actually having news. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool that we've got this little corner of the media universe here in the United States that presents good, solid, vetted, fact-checked, real news. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and help out Free Speech TV. This is it's a really important time. And I mean, not that there haven't been other important times. And I noticed we brought in, as I recall, around $3,000 on Monday and around $5,000 on Tuesday. Typically, we shoot for $10,000 a day and usually hit around $8,000. So we're way down. I'm guessing that's probably because a lot of you have been chipping in to help people with the hurricanes and the floods and the wildfires and everything else. I mean, there's so many needs out there. But I honor that. But that said, Free Speech TV is an important thing too. We have a set of premiums for your gifts. With an $80 gift, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and Ben Cohen's anti-Big Pharma money stamp. With a $120 gift, you get Mike Papantonio's new legal thriller, Law and Vengeance, along with the water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. With a $240 gift, you get 2 books. This is They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. With a $360 gift, you get 3 books. You get Law and Vengeance, you get They Thought They Were Free, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and anti-pharma stamp. Anti-pharma, yeah. And plus you get an autographed copy of my book, Unequal Protection. That's with a $360 gift. With a $480 gift, you get Nancy McLean's book. This is just an absolutely amazing book, Democracy in Chains. It is, in my opinion, one of the best books that's been written this year. It's about the right wing and how they've basically, the corporate right wing, the billionaire right wing, and how they have risen up and essentially taken over our government at levels from local all the way up to federal. And it's really remarkable. So you get that book, plus you get the other 3 books, Unequal Protection by me, They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. Plus you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. And with a $1,000 gift, we'll figure out a way to get together for lunch. Louise and I are going to be spending much of our time, some of our time in Portland, some of our time here in D.C. So, we'll work it out. But that's with a $1,000 gift. Maybe you want to come to Portland. I mean, it's a beautiful town if you'd like to visit Portland. Here's your excuse. So that's that. Those are the goodies essentially that we're offering at those price point levels. But you can donate anything. I mean, if $80 is too high a lift for you, you can call up and make a $10 donation right now, and just to help the network. That's a good and noble thing. Operators are standing by, as they say. And in fact, it may not even be operators. It may be people who work at Free Speech TV who are answering the phone for you. The number is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And, please call now. This is just such an important network to keep going. And it does cost money to get the electrons, to provide the lights, to send this image to you up to the, we have to send it from here to Denver, and then Denver up to the satellite, and then the satellites, both Dish and Direct, and off to cable systems, they pull it off the satellite too. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay, when we talk on the telephone, and when you pick up your phone, you're not yet on TV, but you're live. But it's just an amazing thing, but it costs money. So please call now and help out. Thank you so much.
back. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann. My show is The Zero Hour. You can find it at thisisthezerohour.com or at patreon.com/thezerohour. And before we go to a couple more calls, I just got to ask my producer, even on air, is this article about Orrin Hatch, is this a hoax? Is this The Onion? Oh, okay, Talking Points memo, real story. Senator Orrin Hatch introduced a medical marijuana bill, which is mildly surprising in and of itself, but the language that he used to introduce this bill, well, I'll let you judge for yourselves, okay? The bill is the Marijuana Effective Drug Study Act of 2017 to conduct, it's intended to make it easier to conduct research on the well-known plant for medical use. Hatch said in a statement introducing the bill, and I quote, "It's high time to address research into medical marijuana. To be blunt, we need to remove the administrative barriers preventing legitimate research." And he said that country hasn't had the chance to properly delve, and I quote, "into the weeds," end quote, on the effectiveness of medical marijuana. He added, "I urge my colleagues to join Senator Schatz," that would be Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii, "in our joint effort to help thousands of Americans suffering from a wide range of diseases and disorders." In other words, we learned two things about the conservative Republican Senator Hatch, one being that he is adopting a reasonable and enlightened and important approach toward medical marijuana research, and two, that if you're anything like me, he has the same sense of humor that you and your friends had in junior high about marijuana. So there you have it. Orrin Hatch says it's high time, and I guess the lava lamp in his senatorial offices should have been a dead giveaway about Senator Hatch, but he couldn't resist dropping that one in. Okay, now let's see, who do we want to talk? We had a lot of great calls here, and I'll hate it if we can't get to all of them, but why don't we talk a little bit about okay, here's an interesting call. Karen in Portland wants to talk about Abraham Lincoln and the Communist Manifesto. Karen, you're on the air.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you so much for taking my call. Yeah, I wanted us to place what happened with Lincoln in a larger historical context, and that is that the Communist Manifesto was published in 1848, and the zeitgeist of the time was a growing awareness of workers' importance. And once we get to the Great Depression, of course, by then you've had the communist overthrow in the Soviet Union, and the powers that be, including FDR, of whom I'm very fond, were very afraid that that would happen here. So you have the beginning of this tidal wave, in a sense, of consciousness, and the ruling class trying to take that in, even the great Lincoln, into their parlance at the very least, right?
Sure. No, I think. Go ahead.
And I mean, I'm not a communist. Well, I'm not a communist because I don't believe in the violence piece. But I am a democratic socialist. I have been for many decades, long before I even knew Bernie Sanders existed. I think if our ideas are good enough, the people will want to vote for them, and it's just a question of getting them out there, and we all know about the media and so on. I'm just saying that these movements occur in a larger global context, and that we have to look at that. That's all.
No, there's no question, and thanks for your call and your observations, Karen. I think that that's absolutely right. I think that, obviously there's a huge gap between 1848 and the Great Depression, as you know, and during that period of time, 1848 was a period of revolutionary fervor in Europe in particular, and Lincoln was aware of that. He received an address, rather, and wrote a response to the quote-unquote working men of Manchester, England during his presidency. And you're right. The awareness, people in this country are embarrassed sometimes to talk about classes, whether it's working class. Middle class is okay to discuss, but the lower class, the poverty class, has kind of been off limits in mainstream politics. Working class has started making people uncomfortable in maybe the 70s or so. But these class distinctions, these groups, they're a very real thing. And there should be no hesitation to talk about them. It's also, many people feel, historians, or a number of historians feel, that Franklin D. Roosevelt saved capitalism in this country, that we were headed towards some sort of violent revolution, given the enormity of the Great Depression, if it had not been addressed. And you may remember that his predecessor, Herbert Hoover, his Secretary of the Treasury, had said that it would be a fine idea to just let everything collapse and let things settle out where they may, and let capital then invest in all the foreclosed homes, and let the homeless people figure out what they were going to do with their lives. Had the country continued down that route, we could have had a very different nation than the one we live in today. So there is an ongoing kind of historical tension between the interests of people to make powerful people to make ordinary people's lives better, to tamp down the violence. But I would argue, actually, that we've reached a point in history where wealth is so concentrated and greed is so runaway that the challenge now is to see whether people will even allow moderate improvements. So we're entering into a fascinating period in history. And speaking of fascinating periods in history, let's talk a little bit about banks holding people hostage. Jeff from San Francisco, you are on the air.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the problem.
Maybe you're not. Okay, we will move on.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
All right, let's give you a shot. Jeff, are you there?
Yes, I am.
You're very far away. I'm afraid, my friend, we're not going to be able to hear you. So let's go to the next call. All right, so let's talk about Houston cleanup, Katrina, and labor with Jim from Jupiter. That would be Jupiter, Florida. Jim, you are on the air.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing before I get started in this. That when Grassley proposed the medicalization of marijuana, did somebody tell him that was a pun? You know, that there was no pun intended on it's high time we did this.
Well, that was the point of my reading, and yes, I would venture to say that even Orrin Hatch was aware that we were talking about a silly pun. I'm going to just guess that. So now you had something else you wanted to bring up? I'm sorry, I guess we lost the caller. I really apologize to you for that. This system here I'm just not a master. If you call back, Jim, I will try to bump you up in the queue. In the meantime, let's talk to Joe about Orrin Hatch. Joe, you're on the air.
You got me?
I do. Rock River, Wyoming.
That's it. Well, say I lived in Pocatello, Idaho, probably 20 years ago, and they were, there was a few times when the pharmaceutical companies were really pushing hard for regulation on herbal remedies and natural healing, stuff like that. And Orrin Hatch was always on the side of natural plants used for healing. And that is really kind of, it's been in like the Mormon, I don't know what you'd call it, the way they do things. It's been in their way of doing things for years. So it was a little bit of a surprise, but really not much, because he leans that way. I'm not sure I agree with him on anything else, but I did call him a few times, and they assured me they were going to do whatever they could to keep the pharmaceutical companies out of the herbal remedy business.
No, and since you lived in Idaho, is Orrin Hatch the senator who also writes songs?
Oh, I wouldn't know that. He was out of Utah, and I really didn't pay much attention to him. Other than that,
Oh, okay. Well, all I know then is that I don't imagine that he's a consumer himself. Although I have looked at some of his statements on economic policy and thought to myself, is that guy high? But anyway, Joe from Rock River, Wyoming, Nice talking to you. And let's take another call while we're at it. Let's talk to let's see. Let's talk to George in Lakewood, Colorado, about the Bernie Sanders health care bill, which we'll get to at greater length later in the show. Okay, so George, you're on the air.
Yes, I am. I just wanted to ask a question. Does the health care bill have anything to do with Medicare?
It does. It does in the sense that it expands or improves the benefits for Medicare. It makes them broader and much broader, and extends them to the whole population in a phased out way. So if you're on Medicare,
my next question is: will it be the same as 20%? That people will have to pay 20%?
No, actually,
supplement?
No, actually, one of the things that's going to get a lot of pushback about this bill is that there is no copayment or deductible. So it's 100%. So, and as I say, we'll talk more about it. But no, if this bill were to become law today, people on Medicare would find their financial situation dramatically improved from what it is. But people are going to push back, obviously, on the cost aspect of that. And so I guess that's, but as I say, we're going to have a guest on. We're going to talk about that more. Thanks for your question, George. And I guess what I'll do, I'm going to take one more call before we go. And let's take a call from Tripper in Decatur, Georgia. So, okay, Tripper, you're on the air.
Hi, RJ. How you doing, bud?
Not bad, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. So I wanted to bring up a previous point that another caller brought up about, identity politics, and you had made a comment about how they are kind of inseparable. And I wanted to mention that, I run a Twitter page and I'm prominent on Facebook, and I have a very liberal perspective. And I come in contact with people who are on the alt-right quite frequently, and they love to bash socialism. And one of their biggest arguments against socialism is that, the Nazis were socialists, so if you were trying to bring socialist policies to America, then you're just trying to bring Nazi policies here and blah, blah. And I have often said to them, you're confusing economic policy with identity politics. Like, socialism has been around a lot longer than Nazis have. And that, engaging in socialism is not the same thing as being somebody who's like, okay, well, we're going to have socialism, but not for the Jews and not for blacks and not for gays. And you know what I mean? So, I feel like there has to be some sort of area where you can separate, the fact that the Nazis were socialists. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I think it's a great point, and my answer to it is this, that, right-wingers love to talk about the fact that the Nazis, they love to say the Nazis were socialists because of the name, because the word socialist was in the name of the Nazi Party. Nazi is a shortening of the German words for National Socialist Party. But the fact is they were not socialists in any way. Tripper is exactly right. The national there is the operative word. You can't have any sort of economic equality program that excludes whole portions of the population. And by the way, historians have completely debunked the idea that the Nazis were socialists in any way. They worked with big corporations enormously. They were very close to conservative religious institutions and big corporations. Read about the arms manufacturer Krupp, for example, K-R-U-P-P, and other people who benefited from Nazi slave labor. By no means were they economically socialist. They picked the name, frankly, because at that point in history, in the 1930s, when there was a worldwide economic turmoil and Great Depression, they picked the name just for the looks of it, the optics of it, because it was very popular with working people in Germany and elsewhere. It was picked, and historians have documented this, to confuse German working people so that they wouldn't be drawn to left-wing parties instead. And, there were certain left-wing elements of their program here and there, infrastructure spending, stimulus spending, and so on. But they were corporate right-wingers of the worst order. They preyed on identity politics. They preyed on hate. They were the worst mass murderers in history, but they were corporate mass murderers. They worked with corporations to serve them, and they depended on corporations to provide them with the tools of mass death that they used in an attempt to exterminate an entire people. So to suggest that the Nazis in any way were left-wing is an enormous slur on an entire political ideology. So I think we can put that one to rest. And, coming up later in the show, more about Bernie's health care bill and the Democrats who supported it, more on other news events of the week. And who knows what else people are going to want to bring up. Maybe we'll talk more about Orrin Hatch. Let's stick around and we'll find out. I am Richard R.J. Eskow. I'm sitting in for Thom Hartmann, and we will be back shortly.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom. We're going to talk about Bernie's health care bill and more when we get back, so stick around.
And Barbara in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Barbara, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hey, Thom, how are you doing today?
I'm fine.
You know what? I watched this election go, and 3 weeks ago, I knew how it was going to go.
Yeah.
Because I knew what some parts of America wanted.
Well, I knew it was possible, and throughout this election, I got a note from another talk show host over the weekend titled Apology, and he said, when I had you on my show a couple of months ago, and you said that it was possible that Trump could win, I was absolutely shocked, and I never believed it, and you were right. And I take no, and I've been saying that all along. It's why I've been, pushing people to get out and vote for Clinton, even though she wasn't my first choice, because I thought that Trump actually had a good chance of winning. I mean, I know Middle America. I grew up in Michigan. Back to you, Barbara. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Excuse me. Here's one thing that I really want America to pay attention to. When people say the popular vote don't count, yes, it does. For as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump is not my president. I will never call him President Trump.
Yeah.
His band of bigots that run with him, that's their problem. But the people that voted for Donald Trump, they are fixing to find out the hard way. And I'm not going to feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
Second of all, I praise my president, Barack Hussein Obama, for the dignity, the grace, and the honor that he showed to a man that demeaned him every step of the way. This is why the man has a Nobel Peace Prize. See, America doesn't know this about our president. Donald Trump is going to try to use some of his programs and make them his. Mitch McConnell is smiling. Paul Ryan is smiling. But I'm here to tell them, we are America. I am black. I'm not scared of any man, with a sheet or without a sheet. Do not walk up on me and go to talking out the side of your head, because I'm not going to take it. I'm an American. My father fought for this country. My brother fought for this country. My uncle fought for this country. I am an American, and you're not going to tell me what I can and cannot say, and you're not going to tell me that I can and cannot protest. To the children of America, keep marching. Don't quit marching. Keep marching. Let this man know, no.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. In fact, I had intended to open the show by talking about the marches all over the country, and I got mentally derailed. I've got to get back to that as soon as the break is over, or at the next break. But I think you're absolutely right, Barbara, and obviously you're a courageous person. Good on you for saying it.
I mean it with all my heart. I literally mean it with all my heart. Yeah. This is my doggone country.
Yeah.
And no plutocrat or whatever they want to call themselves is going to stand and tell me how I can and can't live in my country.
Yeah.
God bless America. America's great, and America, keep fighting.
Yeah.
Keep fighting on. Thank you, Thom.
Thank you, Barbara. Well said. Well said. And this is what I'm calling on Chuck Schumer to do, is to say no to everything they bring forward. It's going to take 60 votes to pass anything. through this, or it should. This is. Keep in mind, for the last 8 years, and the press never even commented on this, by the way. You know, the extension of long-term unemployment insurance. It had enough votes to pass the Senate, but it was filibustered by the Republicans. The press didn't even mention. They just said, well, they failed to hit the 60-vote limit. Now, when the Democrats do that, is the press going to say, oh, the Democrats filibustered it? I'm guessing they probably will, because our press in this country is largely right-wing and Republican. Believe that.
And we are back. This is Richard RJSCast sitting in for Thom Hartmann. A quick story for you to think about. The Supreme Court overruled a lower court ruling that held off on Texas's basically gerrymandering. The lower court found that the electoral districts drawn by Republicans in Texas discriminated against minority voters. No shock there. They're doing that in every state they can. But
Steve,
on a party line vote, this politicized right-wing dominated Supreme Court voted 5-4 to stay the lower court judge's decision so that Texans must keep voting along these prejudicial lines until they rule on this case. You know, I want to know the extent of Russian involvement in American elections, but it always surprises me how much some people overlook in talking about Russian involvement in our democratic institutions. How many Democrats don't talk about Republican subversion of our democratic political institutions, which is widely documented. We know they gerrymander. We know that they suppress minority votes in an utterly prejudicial way. We know that our political system is corrupt and run by big money. Russia is ruled by oligarchs, and we should make sure they don't pollute our political system. But American oligarchs have no more right to steal our democracy than Russian oligarchs do. So while Mr. Mueller is investigating the role of Russia in our elections, why don't we make it a campaign and a cause to get American oligarchs out of our political system, to go for a system of publicly funded elections, to get rid of dark money, to make this a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We will be right back after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeats.com.
Thom Hartmann here for Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is a vital part of our media infrastructure. You've heard me say it a million times. I'll say it again. There is such a lack of good, clean, honest reporting and commentary in the American media scene because all of our corporate media has gone to a exclusively for-profit infotainment model rather than the old nonprofit news model that existed pre-1987 when Reagan ended the Fairness Doctrine. Before 1987, news agencies typically lost money for their parent companies because the news was the price of the station license. Now they all make money. Les Moonves famously said, Donald Trump may be terrible for America, but he sure is great for CBS. I'm paraphrasing from memory, but words to that effect, as you'll recall. He was the president of CBS, or the CEO, or whatever his title is. And this has created a real mess for all of us, trying to understand what's going on in the world, because all the news is either sports, who's ahead, who's behind, or drama, who's agonizing, and or who's happy, or who's winning, who's losing, that kind of stuff, rather than what are the issues, what do they mean, how will they affect your life? If you want to know those things, you have to come to Free Speech TV, which is, unfortunate in a large sense for the United States. I mean, I would love to see the rest of America actually having news. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool that we've got this little corner of the media universe here in the United States that presents good, solid, vetted, fact-checked, real news. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and help out Free Speech TV. This is it's a really important time. And I mean, not that there haven't been other important times. And I noticed we brought in, as I recall, around $3,000 on Monday and around $5,000 on Tuesday. Typically, we shoot for $10,000 a day and usually hit around $8,000. So we're way down. I'm guessing that's probably because a lot of you have been chipping in to help people with the hurricanes and the floods and the wildfires and everything else. I mean, there's so many needs out there. But I honor that. But that said, Free Speech TV is an important thing too. We have a set of premiums for your gifts. With an $80 gift, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and Ben Cohen's anti-Big Pharma money stamp. With a $120 gift, you get Mike Papantonio's new legal thriller, Law and Vengeance, along with the water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. With a $240 gift, you get 2 books. This is They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. With a $360 gift, you get 3 books. You get Law and Vengeance, you get They Thought They Were Free, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and anti-pharma stamp. Anti-pharma, yeah, and plus you get an autographed copy of my book, Unequal Protection. That's with a $360 gift. With a $480 gift, you get Nancy McLean's book. This is just an absolutely amazing book, Democracy in Chains. It is, in my opinion, one of the best books that's been written this year. It's about the right wing and how they've basically, the corporate right wing, the billionaire right wing, and how they have risen up and essentially taken over our government at levels from local all the way up to federal. And it's really remarkable. So you get that book, plus you get the other 3 books, Unequal Protection by me, They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. Plus you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. And with a $1,000 gift, we'll figure out a way to get together for lunch. Louise and I are going to be spending much of our time, some of our time in Portland, some of our time here in D.C. So, We'll work it out. But that's with a $1,000 gift. Maybe you want to come to Portland. I mean, it's a beautiful town if you'd like to visit Portland. Here's your excuse. So that's that. You know, those are the goodies essentially that we're offering at those price point levels. But you can donate anything. I mean, if $80 is too high a lift for you, you can call up and make a $10 donation right now, and you know, just to help the network. That's a good and noble thing. Operators are standing by, as they say. And in fact, it may not even be operators. It may be people who work at Free Speech TV who are answering the phone for you. The number is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And, you know, please call now. This is just such an important network to keep going. And it does cost money to get the electrons, to provide the lights, to send this image to you up to the, you know, we have to send it from here to Denver, and then Denver up to the satellite, and then the satellites, you know, both Dish and Direct and off to cable systems, they pull it off the satellite too. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay, you know, when we talk on the telephone, and you know, when you pick up your phone, you know, you're not yet on TV, but you're live. But it's just an amazing thing, but it costs money. So please call now and help out. Thank you so much.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we are back on the air. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Tom. And joining me now is a good friend and one of the nation's best experts in the area of social insurance. Nancy J. Altman is the president of Social Security Works. She has encyclopedic knowledge on this topic. And she has recently written a piece that I liked very much regarding Bernie Sanders and the new Medicare for All bill. And the thesis of that piece, which I think is absolutely correct, is that this bill is the logical conclusion or next step for the New Deal. So first of all, Nancy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Secondly, how much did I mangle the thesis of your
I think you're exactly
recent essay?
right, but it's not. You started to say final, and it's not. It's
right.
The next step.
I took it back.
I know.
Yeah.
Because Franklin Roosevelt and the others around him were visionaries, and we have not come close to achieving their vision, but one of their elements of that vision was universal, high-quality health care for everyone.
And so when we talk about universal and high quality, I mean, those are, to me, two compelling words. And they're two words that cannot, look, let me preface my comment by saying I want to defend the Affordable Care Act. But I think there are two words that cannot be applied to the status quo. One, because we know that at least 20 million people in this country, more actually, are not covered under the Affordable Care Act. So it's not universal. Secondly, high quality. You know, I've written about this a lot, the fact that the actuaries tell us that the average family of four with quote unquote good employer coverage will pay, on average, almost $11,000 a year out of pocket costs. That is not affordable.
That is correct. But let me say one more thing about the vision of the New Deal, and then go back to the Affordable Care, or the Obamacare, or called the Affordable Care Act. Part of their vision was not just universal high-quality health care, but sick pay, because their attitude was, if you get sick, of course you need treatment, but you're also not getting an income. And we are not close yet to having universal paid sick leave for every worker.
Yeah, and the other thing that's striking, I'm glad that you brought that up, because in both cases, we as a country, you know, we love to talk about American exceptionalism and how we're number one at this and that, but we lag behind virtually every developed country. I mentioned earlier in the show that we lag behind most developed countries in terms of the value of our Social Security benefits, for example. But we're the only one without nationally guaranteed health insurance. And we're pretty much at the bottom when it comes to sick leave, family leave to care for a sick one, vacation leave, the things that we who like to be number one aren't number one at, which also happen to be, we like to brag that we're a family values country, but they also happen to be the things that allow families to lead a wholesome life together.
Absolutely. And that's why the Democrats really detoured away from the principles underlying the New Deal and really fighting for working people by having government provide, because government can do it most efficiently, most fairly, most well, providing these benefits through Social Security, through Medicare for all. We are latecomers and all this, and these are not new ideas that there should be paid sick leave, there should be paid family leave. This was something they were talking about in the 1930s.
Yeah, so absolutely. No, and by the way, I want to let our listeners know that we're talking with Nancy J. Altman, president of Social Security Works, and Nancy and I will take some calls on this subject in the second segment. No, I think that's actually right. And I've been beating this drum about we're number one, and and I was pleased to see at the press conference rolling out this bill that I've gotten people mad. My Democratic friends, as President Obama used to say, I've made some of them mad because I was critical of Cory Booker on Wall Street and Obama's positions on Wall Street too. He actually criticized Obama from the right at one point about in 2012. So I've said that this bill, the Medicare for All Act, has shifted the art of the possible in politics. And when you get me to compliment Cory Booker, we know we've shifted the art of the possible, but I thought Cory Booker made a great point, speaking to my pet peeve, in the press conference when he said we're always going around saying we're number one, yet we're way at the bottom at this issue that matters most, this life and death issue. Don't you think he was exactly right?
Exactly right. No one in other countries, you can't find people in Canada or France or Britain or any other country saying, oh, we want the American system. We want to spend 18% of our GDP instead of 8% on healthcare. We want to have a high out-of-pocket cost. We want to have all this paperwork, filling out insurance forms. Nobody wants that. This is one, and in fact, Social Security is the same thing, that we learn, there are things to be learned from other countries, and Social Security was one of them. We were latecomers to that. We are very latecomers to Medicare for All, but we will reach it, and then then we can go back to saying we're exceptional.
So let's talk. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about how the framers of the New Deal saw what we call Medicare for All. That was always part of the vision, wasn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, we have narrowed the concept of Social Security. They saw Social Security as economic security. In fact, one of the founders, the first commissioner of Social Security, said that around the world it's become known as the good life. It was something we introduced in the language, and other countries picked it up. And they understood it to be, you cannot have economic security if you don't have a healthy childhood. You cannot have economic security if you don't have an education. You can't have economic security if you don't have guaranteed employment. And you certainly can't have economic security if you're one illness away from bankruptcy. And so they almost proposed it as part of the Social Security Act, and President Roosevelt was planning to do it, and then World War II intervened.
We've talked about this before, Nancy Altman, but this is the first time I've really kind of glommed onto this in a different way. The fact that, when you think about it, the name Social Security, we've heard it all our lives. We have an association with it. It's for when you get disabled. It's for when you got older and shouldn't have to work anymore. So in the context of what it is, wage replacement, that's what we picture. But actually, the phrase itself, those two words, Social Security, are very all-encompassing of what it means to know that you can be secure throughout your life in a society that believes in mutual sustenance. Am I putting
President Roosevelt, in fact, used the phrase frequently, cradle to grave. Mm-hmm. That's how he understood Social Security, economic security, that you have it from the moment you're born to the moment you die. And for that, you need all of the things we're talking about, including universal health insurance. And they, as I say, President Roosevelt had a commission that he put together 6 months before he introduced legislation. It was a committee that was interagency. And there were various working groups, and there was one on universal health insurance. And they developed material and studied it and report. And President Roosevelt decided at the end that it was just too much of a lift to have all of this, because it was much more than even just what we think of as Social Security. It was maternal and child health. They had a lot of welfare programs. There were a variety of pieces of this. But he immediately, after Social Security was enacted, which he described as a cornerstone on which to build, called for a conference on universal health insurance, had all kinds of studies. For the first time, the country did health surveys to see the health of people, all laying the groundwork, and talked about running on the issue, perhaps in 1936, perhaps in 1940. And then before he really pushed it, Pearl Harbor happened, and we were entered into World War II. But even then, he sent a budget message to Congress in January of 1942, so just a month after Pearl Harbor. And in it, he said, we've got to mobilize for the war effort, but we also we're a wealthy enough country that we can make sure we have healthy people. And he was asking for universal health insurance, even in 1942.
And he was talking about the four freedoms, which around that period of time,
exactly,
which talked about freedom from want and so on. Now, I'll remind people, if anybody wants to talk about this, give us a call. Should I give the number? Should I? 202-808-9925 is the number I see up there. And Nancy Altman and I will be back talking more about the Medicare for All Act. But I do want to, before we go, just quickly, before we go to break, quickly say that Social Security, then, to me, is really the vision of the kind of society we ought to be. The phrase Social Security, it would be good if people, when they hear it in the future, envision a better kind of society than the one we are living in today. So why don't we go to break, and Nancy Altman and I will be back after this. I am Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Thom Hartmann, and we shall return.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Tom, and we will be right back. All right, so we are back. I'm Richard R.J. Eskow, and we are here with Nancy J. Altman. We are talking about Social Security. So, we have a couple minutes, Nancy. We might want to mention on this topic Tom Paine. Tell us a little bit about Tom Paine, because I think there's a through line here.
That's right. We've been talking about how Medicare for All is the next step in the New Deal. But really, these concepts of cradle-to-grave protection go back to our founding. And as you say, Tom Paine, the pamphleteer from our revolutionary days, wrote a short book called Agrarian Justice. And in it, he proposed essentially Social Security. Excuse me. He proposed old age pensions paid for with an estate tax, which is the perfect way to pay for it. Plus, he went beyond Social Security and said, when you're, of course, they didn't go to college then, but when you're reach adulthood, you're starting a family, you shouldn't start with debt. And his concept was everyone who turned 21 should get assets, should get a lump of money to start out. Wouldn't that be wonderful today if people at 21 emerged out of college or vocational school or wherever they were at that point in their lives, not only debt-free, but with money in their bank accounts?
Yeah, and I also, by the way, just so our listeners understand, agrarian justice, that, the agrarian economy that we lived in then was really, as well, almost like would be to talk about working people's justice. Today, that was the kind of working class of the day, was the agrarian class. So he was really saying there should be justice for everybody, regardless of social position. And yeah, I'm fascinated by that, lump sum everybody gets at birth. It's related to the idea that's being debated now about a universal basic income, which I have feelings about, but the notion that we should be exploring what it means to be part of a collaborative society. Okay, so we are now back. Is that right? I'm still talking. Did we ever stop talking? Okay, because the light went on. Okay, so this is a fascinating, mysterious environment here. I have to say, by the way, lights go on and off, cameras go on and on. And meanwhile, we're talking about a book that was written, 240 years ago. I'll tell you, if Tom Paine were sitting in this chair right now, greatest rhetorician and polemicist in American history, I think he'd be even more flummoxed than I am today. But we are going to be back with Nancy J. Altman after the break. We're going to be talking more about Social Security, the program, Social Security, the concept, and most of all about Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All Act. So please stick with us. And again, if you want to give us a call and talk about it, we will be here to talk with you. We are taking your calls. So with that, I guess we can go ahead and take a break, right? All right. And we are back. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann. If you want to know more about my program, The Zero Hour, you can go to patreon.com/The Zero Hour, or thisisthezerohour.com. Again, we are talking with Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works, about Social Security, the concept, Social Security, the program, a little bit, and most of all, especially now, about the Medicare for All Act that was introduced in the Senate today by Bernie Sanders with 16, count them, 16 Democratic co-sponsors. Nancy, the last time Bernie introduced a Medicare for All Act was 2013, and the number of co-sponsors he had was, give or take, 0. So something's changing, right?
And it's not just the quantity of co-sponsors, which is 16, that original co-sponsors on his Medicare for All Act. It's actually the quality. Everyone you can think of who is being talked about as a possible 2020 Democratic presidential candidate is on the Medicare for All bill. And for a good reason. It is the logical next step. It makes sense. We were talking in the first part about the history. Medicare was supposed to be a first step to Medicare for All. The people who put it together, working with Lyndon Johnson, that was their concept. They covered seniors in 1965, people with disabilities in 1972. They went and covered the most expensive parts of the population, the parts that would be the hardest to cover. The rest is easy. Covering children is a snap because children, all you need really is preventive care for most children. So we've done the hard part, and we've had this little hiatus. It should have been done, 1972. We covered people with disabilities, and now we're at 2017. But thank goodness the Democrats have returned to their roots, and they have Medicare for all.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. We did take on the toughest population first, the one with the least coverage, the one with the most expensive costs, and the next most expensive population are the 55s to 65, who, if you look at the stats, are quite, the expenses start really climbing in that age group. Now, Bernie's bill would phase in coverage, and initially, it happens over time, which I think is smart. And the 55s and up are, I think, among the first.
I think they are the first.
First, and children, what we used to call Medi-kids.
That's right.
Right.
I mean, the interesting thing about having 55, under current law, your earliest age of eligibility for Medicare is age 65. And if you take 55 to 65 and take them out of private sector health insurance and put them in Medicare, both sides win because they are the most expensive part of private health insurance. So those premiums go down and they go into Medicare, and they are the least expensive part of Medicare. So those premiums go down. So everybody wins.
Right. And as long as before we go to break, and again, I want to remind people that we're going to be taking calls with Nancy after we come back from this next break. But I used to work, some people know this, I used to work doing actuarial and analytical work for the health insurance industry, believe it or not, the dark side. And it absolutely works out. It makes arithmetic sense. It makes economic sense to do this. And by the way, speaking of everybody winning, other countries aren't burdened with the runaway healthcare costs that our country is, and American businesses are going to find out, to their pleasant surprise, that they're a lot more competitive when they're not having to shoulder the costs and the administrative effort that it takes to administer an employee benefits plan. The effort that goes into it, the staffing you have to do in your human resources department, it's just a huge burden for America. The capitalists of America unite, is my call, behind the Medicare for All Act. So again, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Nancy and I are going to take your calls on this issue of the Medicare for All Act. So why don't we say that we're going to have a book report after this break, and then when we come back from that, and our advertisers and our affiliates, Nancy and I will be talking about the Medicare for All Act with you. I'm Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Thom Hartmann.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we will be right back after this. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann. Please don't go away.
Thom Hartmann here for Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is a vital part of our media infrastructure. You've heard me say it a million times. I'll say it again. There is such a lack of good, clean, honest reporting and commentary in the American media scene because all of our corporate media has gone to a exclusively for-profit infotainment model rather than the old nonprofit news model that existed pre-1987 when Reagan ended the Fairness Doctrine. Before 1987, news agencies typically lost money for their parent companies because the news was the price of the station license. Now they all make money. Les Moonves famously said, Donald Trump may be terrible for America, but he sure is great for CBS. I'm paraphrasing from memory, but words to that effect, as you'll recall. He was the president of CBS, or the CEO, or whatever his title is. And this has created a real mess for all of us, trying to understand what's going on in the world, because all the news is either sports, who's ahead, who's behind, or drama, who's agonizing, and or who's happy, or who's winning, who's losing, that kind of stuff. Rather than what are the issues, what do they mean, how will they affect your life? If you want to know those things, you have to come to Free Speech TV, which is, unfortunate in a large sense for the United States. I mean, I would love to see the rest of America actually having news. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool that we've got this little corner of the media universe here in the United States that presents good, solid, vetted, fact-checked, real news. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and help out Free Speech TV. This is it's a really important time. And I mean, not that there haven't been other important times. And I noticed we brought in, as I recall, around $3,000 on Monday and around $5,000 on Tuesday. Typically, we shoot for $10,000 a day and usually hit around $8,000. So we're way down. I'm guessing that's probably because a lot of you have been chipping in to help people with the hurricanes and the floods and the wildfires and everything else. I mean, there's so many needs out there. But I honor that. But that said, Free Speech TV is an important thing too. We have a set of premiums for your gifts. With an $80 gift, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and Ben Cohen's anti-Big Pharma money stamp. With a $120 gift, you get Mike Papantonio's new legal thriller, Law and Vengeance, along with the water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. With a $240 gift, you get 2 books. This is They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. With a $360 gift, you get 3 books. You get Law and Vengeance, you get They Thought They Were Free, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and anti-pharma stamp. Anti-pharma, yeah, and plus you get a copy, an autographed copy of my book, Unequal Protection. That's with a $360 gift. With a $480 gift, you get Nancy McLean's book. This is just an absolutely amazing book, Democracy in Chains. It is, in my opinion, one of the best books that's been written this year. It's about the right wing and how they've basically, the corporate right wing, the billionaire right wing, and how they have risen up and essentially taken over our government at levels from local all the way up to federal. And it's really remarkable. So you get that book, plus you get the other 3 books, Unequal Protection by me, They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. Plus you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. And with a $1,000 gift, we'll figure out a way to get together for lunch. Louise and I are going to be spending much of our time, some of our time in Portland, some of our time here in D.C. So, we'll work it out. But that's with a $1,000 gift. Maybe you want to come to Portland. I mean, it's a beautiful town if you'd like to visit Portland. Here's your excuse. So that's that. Those are the goodies essentially that we're offering at those price point levels. But you can donate anything. I mean, if $80 is too high a lift for you, you can call up and make a $10 donation right now, and just to help the network. That's a good and noble thing. Operators are standing by, as they say, and in fact, it may not even be operators. It may be people who work at Free Speech TV who are answering the phone for you. The number is 877-378-8669. 877-378-8669, and please call now. This is just such an important network to keep going. And it does cost money to get the electrons, to provide the lights, to send this image to you up to the, we have to send it from here to Denver, and then Denver up to the satellite. And then the satellites, both Dish and Direct and off to cable systems, they pull it off the satellite too. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay, when we talk on the telephone, and when you pick up your phone, you're not yet on TV, but you're live. But it's just an amazing thing, but it costs money. So please call now and help out. Thank you so much.
And we are back on the Thom Hartmann Show. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Tom. We are here with Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works. And as I mentioned, we were going to be taking some calls from you, our listeners, on what Nancy and I have been talking about. Social Security, history of Social Security, history of the New Deal, how the Medicare for All Act is the logical next step in the evolution of the New Deal and the society that it reinforces and seeks to create. So with that, Nancy, if it's okay with you, I thought we would take a couple of these calls. Let's see. How about Dale in Harmony, North Carolina, nice town name, by the way, wants to talk about both topics, Social Security and Medicare for All. Dale, you're on the air.
Okay, Social Security for all is the only thing that's going to work with a nightmare of health problems that's going to be coming on to humans there that's already started with diabetes, MS, cancers, and all that stuff. There's no insurance companies out there that's going to insure this stuff and cover it. It's only going to be able to be covered under a single payer system there because the system we got is totally not working, and the people that needs health care cannot afford it. And that is running conclusive with exactly what is going on our dairy farm due to the high sulfur level that was put in byproduct feeds that were put in our feeds that caused a catastrophic disaster on our dairy farms. And even the Farm Service Agency said it was a man-made disaster. And I see the same symptoms that the cows have that's in the humans out there with inflammation, all kinds of swelling, and even the head pressing with your brain swelling. And there's nobody out there willing to talk about this subject out there, but it's in the animals, it's in the humans and all. And there's going to be a catastrophic amount of health care that's going to have to be done. And there's no way that the insurance companies are going to cover this out there because I've done talked to some insurance people about it, and they say this is guaranteed damage, and it's in the food system there. And what the Food and Drug Administration is going to do to straighten it up, I do not know, because we have went round and round with them on this, and the government is not talking on this situation. That is how serious it is.
Yeah, well, a couple thoughts about that. First of all, Dale, terrible that people have to go through this. I'm so sorry for the folks in your community that are struggling with this. But secondly, I think there are a number of issues that this raises, and Nancy, what's your thoughts on this too? Number one is when you have a system that is dependent on private sector health insurance, then you're always going to have the incentives in the wrong place. The incentives, and I know I worked in that business for years, the incentives, whether it's health insurance, whether it's liability insurance, product liability insurance, in this case, feed, or an animal husbandry product that was poisonous to animals and humans, you're always going to have, first of all, the incentive not to pay for something you've accepted a premium to insure, and secondly, to kind of selectively pick and choose. We call it in the healthcare business adverse selection, avoid adverse selection. Cherry picking was the industry term to make sure the healthy people join your insurance plan, but the unhealthy people do not. And, the Affordable Care Act, I would say, was a noble effort to work within the confines of the private sector health insurance system, but it's too complex, it's too cumbersome, it's too expensive, and it really takes accountability away from the people. So maybe you have some thoughts on that?
I do. First of all, I share it. I want to echo what Richard said about our hearts really go out to the people you were talking about, Dale. But the basic underlying point is exactly right. First of all, health care is and should be a right, not a privilege. So it should not depend on where you work or where you live or whether you have a pre-existing condition or anything else. The Medicare, which covers the most expensive parts of the population, actually is more efficient and has much lower administrative costs than private insurance, and certainly than for-profit private insurance. Medicare, the most efficient insurance is ones that cover as broad a risk pool as possible, get everybody in, and has, as Richard said, no adverse selection, the ability to say, oh, I'm sick now, I'm going to go in for the insurance. Well, the only entity in our society that can require everyone to participate at the moment you are born is the federal government. And and the other thing that's beneficial about having the government sponsor this, you don't have high-paid CEOs who are taking big fat salaries out of people's premiums. The civil servants are hardworking people paying for this. You don't have advertising costs. You don't have marketing. You don't have all that kind of overhead that you find in our system, but you don't find in systems around the world. So there's no question, there's no surprise that we pay 18% of our gross domestic product, our collective wealth, on health care, and most other countries pay around 8%.
Right, and you know, when we talk about the Social Security Society, that's the phrase I'm going to call it. It's a little circular there because social's in it, but Social Security Society, also, you don't have a system where the insurance company is trying to manipulate you. The people that Dale is talking about should not have to go through all they have to go through. He shouldn't have to call all these different companies and agencies like he's had to do. They should know it's taken care of. And people who have to go through the bureaucracy, people say government's a bureaucracy. Try to find out what's covered under your health insurance plan. Then you'll see your private corporate health insurance plan. Then you'll see what a bureaucracy is. You know what I want to do, real quickly, because I want to take one more call before we go.
At the moment of birth, generally, you usually apply for your Social Security card. You get your Social Security card. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you get your Medicare card? You walk in, any doctor's office, you just hand the Medicare card, and everything gets taken care of.
I like that vision. We're going to take one call. We're going to make it pretty quick. We've got Dewana in what looks like Warner Robins, Georgia. Let me make sure. Okay. Okay. Dewana, you're on the air.
Thank you. Yes, my son passed away last year at the age of 38 of a massive heart attack. He could not get insurance. He worked for a company that would only give him part-time for a year, which was, 39 hours a week. He never got the 40th hour to give him full benefits. And just a month after he was supposed to get his full benefits, he passed away. He was fighting for health care, and he knew he needed it, and he had gone to the emergency room several times, and they would just say, go to your doctor. When he would go to the doctor, I would pay for it, but they would only just give him blood pressure medication and a statin and a water pill and let him go. They never operated on him because he didn't have health insurance. And
Dewana, I am so sorry for your loss. I know that there is no greater grief that a human being can experience that I can imagine than that of a parent who's lost their child. And it's, maybe I'll close with some thoughts when we're done, Nancy, but your thoughts.
Well, absolutely. I share that. And the idea, and in fact, President Obama talked about this with his own mother, that when you have a life-threatening illness, whatever it is, to have to worry about can you pay for the coverage is horrible. It is immoral. And this is really a moral issue as well as an economic issue. We've been talking about how much money we would save as a society and as individuals if we had Medicare for all. But there's a morality to it as well. And you and your son should not have had to worry about what kind of care you can get and how much you can afford. That should be all of us collectively.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just close by saying, Nancy, that I agree with everything you've said. And I also think this is a story that illustrates how the system we have now can literally kill. We talk about economics, we talk about policy, but we're talking about life and death. And so, let's not be clever and pretend that we're talking about ponies or if we're Republicans say cutesy artificial things about the power of the free market. Well, you know, when I hear a story like that, you know, like Dewana's, my answer is, you know, honestly, what the hell is wrong with you people? You know, we are trying to save lives here. You know, one guy did a reasonable projection that the Affordable Care Act, if it's not repealed, will save 320,000 lives, maybe, going forward in the next 20 years. But that this bill, or something like it, truly universal coverage, could save another 180,000 lives in the same period. I'm guesstimating on the numbers, but that was roughly it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of human lives. It's not a game. It's life and death. So when you listen to Nancy Altman and read her work on this stuff, when you listen to me read my work on this stuff, listen to Thom, just remember, we're talking about humanity. We're talking about lives, and there is nothing more important. Nancy Altman, thanks so much for joining us, and we will be back after this. I'm Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Thom Hartmann.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann, and we will be back shortly. Stick around.
Hey, Steve, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Thom, thanks for taking my call. Last night, Bernie Sanders was on Rachel Maddow, and he did something and said something which I really appreciated, and that was a kind of talked about strategy, and that the resistance is really important. It's a critical part of the strategy, but it comes with also continuing to push progressive agenda because that's what the country wants. So we have to resist Donald Trump and push for $15 an hour and push for free college tuition and push for expanding Social Security, not just preserving it. And all of these things have to happen at the same time, which makes our job that much more difficult. But I really appreciated hearing that the party and the left has to be more than just being opposed to Trump. They actually have to be for progressive agendas, and that I just wanted to share that with you, and I really
and that's what people want. Steve, in 1981, one of the advisors to I think it was Lee Atwater, one of the advisors to Ronald Reagan, I may be wrong on exactly who it was, but I'm pretty sure it was Lee Atwater, came up with this idea of what he referred to as the perpetual campaign. Kevin Phillips, I think, later wrote a book about this. And basically was every single day that goes by should be an opportunity to get some press that will cause more people, more kind of undecided people or low information people to think you're doing a great job, your party's doing a great job, and the next election comes, I really should vote for you. And Reagan was the first presidency where we saw this continual, perpetual campaign. He campaigned, or he or his surrogates, literally every day of the 8 years that he was president. And that was not something that was picked up by Bill Clinton. Now, Bill Clinton didn't have to do it methodically because he was such a brilliant politician himself. He was always down on the Hill, glad-handing people and talking to people and talking to the press and stuff. And of course, it would have been very difficult given all the impeachment hearings and whatnot. But basically, every Republican has done this, and the Obama administration did not even remotely consider doing something like this. They have done the opposite of this. They've basically kind of said, we're governing things. We've got this. Chill out. Don't worry. We've got this under control. And that, obviously has not worked well. And what I didn't see Bernie on Rachel last night because I was in bed by then. But I have read the articles about it. I saw a clip of it this morning. And it looks to me like what Bernie is proposing is that Democrats start doing what Republicans figured out works in 1980.
Can I add one more thing?
Please.
I think when people are saying we want leadership that fights, to me what that means is we may not have the votes necessarily to win, but we'll still push legislation that pushes progressive agendas. So we may not have the votes to get like $15 an hour on the federal level, but if we still push it and Republicans vote it down, or if we still push for free college tuition, and Republicans voted down. At least we're fighting for the things that we believe in.
Yep.
And I know that's something I would appreciate, and I think most of the country would appreciate too, because most of the country, I think, across the political aisle still wants these progressive agendas.
We are, we're a progressive country. There's just no doubt about that. There's, any poll will tell you that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Steve, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be back in and thanks for the great observation, by the way, Steve. I really think that this is the key to the whole thing. Is now for the next, now I was going to say for the next 4 years, maybe now forever, the Democrats, progressive Democrats, need to get up and get out there, get organized and get out there every single day with their message.
We are back. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, news cycles seem to be going faster than ever. So let's check in with Talk Media News on what's happening out there. Patrick Gavin from Talk Media News joins us now. Patrick, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm okay, all things considered in this universe. So what's the latest?
Well, everyone here is kind of trying to get a sense of what's going on with the Dreamer Act and now the House and Senate's efforts to try to figure out a way forward given President Trump's directive with that. We've heard some news this week about some of Trump's meetings with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi on that very issue, and they've been largely positive meetings, it seems. I mean, Trump very much does seem to be more enamored, I think, with the kind of press he's been getting by at least meeting with Democrats than he ever got any press from his famously contentious relationships with Republicans, who, by the way, have yet to, again, just adopting Trump's worldview here, who have yet to bring him an actual legislative victory, which really just sort of kind of gives you a great insight, I think, into how this really is kind of a cable news presidency, a president who really does judge his highs and lows based on what he sees on TV. But I think that, besides Trump wanting to get a legislative accomplishment, and I guess maybe Democrats as well, it is, I think, very hard to see what the real upside for either Trump or Democrats are when it comes to working together. I mean, first of all, Trump needs, his party has both houses of Congress, so, he needs Republican votes. He needs not Democratic votes. And obviously on the Democratic side, I mean, there's almost no upside for any Democrat to work together with Trump, at least politically speaking, maybe not on the policy end. But, when any of these folks, be it Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or anybody, or even further still, anybody who has presidential ambitions, they're going to be judged, I think, on how little they worked with Trump, not how much they worked together on Trump. So it's hard to see what the long game is for them. But, I think that, for Trump, the reality is that his base, however small it is very, very loyal and sticky. I think that it's, something like 97, 98% of Republicans who voted for Trump in the primary in general are still with him. So, he may be able to afford these occasional dalliances with Democrats and not upset his base. On to the more substantive part about what they're actually working on. I mean, Paul Ryan's job is he's putting together a working group of both moderate Republicans and then some of these immigration hardliners to try to find the solution that at least his party can support. And so he's got some folks like Bob Goodlatte from Virginia and Raul Labrador and Jim Sensenbrenner, all fairly hardliners on immigration, but also trying to bring on some more centrist members, especially from some Hispanic-populated districts as well. On the Democratic side, they're trying to make sure that their base is still in line with them after sort of cutting this latest deal or quote-unquote deal with President Trump to protect the Dreamers. Schumer and Pelosi are getting a bit of incoming fire from some Hispanic lawmakers who are upset about the announcement Wednesday about this deal, and also I think curious about exactly what this unspecified boost in border security would be. So DACA remains on the forefront of all lawmakers here in Washington, D.C., but the actual politics of it are really, really complicated to sort out for all these reasons.
Yeah, it sounds like Trump may already have gotten what he wanted, which is just a little good publicity, and if it leaves a mess behind him for members of Congress in both parties to clean up, it may not even interest him, right?
Yeah, and this is to me what's the hardest part of sort of this week's news cycle is, which is like what is real and what is just kind of the political press, hoping that perhaps this is like a Reagan Tip O'Neill type thing, and whether or not Trump knows that and feeds into it. I mean, reports out of the White House say that Trump is very giddy about sort of the kind of press he received. But also, I think that, one of the things he never liked and continues to not like about Washington is this idea that, that he has to play the parlor game, that he has to work together with Mitch McConnell, who he basically abhors, and Paul Ryan, who he likes a little better. Trump just wants to do his own thing, and Trump wants to not feel constrained by anything or, the party system or checks and balances or any of these things. He's loyal to himself, and that's it. He doesn't have a guiding philosophy. Which explains why he flip-flops fairly regularly. So, that's the reporting you hear out of the White House, but it's also, I think any political pundit or reporter would be, I think, smart to, not sort of proclaim this ushering the new era of bipartisanship in, just because, it's hard to tell what's real. In other words, is Donald Trump truly having a change of heart about working together with Democrats, or is this just sort of the flavor of the week because he enjoys the press coverage?
Right. And I think that's a great analysis. Patrick, we got about 30 seconds. Any other quick headline you want to run by us?
Well, real quickly, everybody's still working on tax reform. The Big Six in the Senate actually are not very close to any consensus on the basic elements of tax reform, including how to rewrite the tax code and especially these individual and corporate rates, which remain a real debate within the Republican Party. So that until that Big Six gets their act in order, I wouldn't expect anything big on tax reform to happen anytime soon.
So it looks like it's a replay of the health care repeal and replace bill, where they can't agree exactly how they want to do what they want to do.
That's exactly. The Republican Party tends to get in the way of the Republican Party's goals more than anything else.
Well, and so that's pretty much the only thing, from my point of view, that we have to thank the Republican Party for these days, is that it's its own worst enemy. So very informative, as always, Patrick Gavin, Talk Media News. Thanks so much for joining us, and I guess we're going to have to move forward from here by saying let's hope the Republicans continue to get under each other's feet and Donald Trump continues to be a mystery. So for Thom Hartmann, this is Richard R.J. Eskow. Thank you, Patrick Gavin, and we will be right back after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Thom Hartmann here for Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is a vital part of our media infrastructure. You've heard me say it a million times. I'll say it again. There is such a lack of good, clean, honest reporting and commentary in the American media scene because all of our corporate media has gone to a exclusively for-profit infotainment model rather than the old nonprofit news model that existed pre-1987 when Reagan ended the Fairness Doctrine. Before 1987, news agencies typically lost money for their parent companies because the news was the price of the station license. Now they all make money. Les Moonves famously said, Donald Trump may be terrible for America, but he sure is great for CBS. I'm paraphrasing from memory, but words to that effect, as you'll recall. He was the president of CBS, or the CEO, or whatever his title is. And this has created a real mess for all of us, trying to understand what's going on in the world, because all the news is either sports, who's ahead, who's behind, or drama, who's agonizing, and or who's happy, or who's winning, who's losing, that kind of stuff. Rather than what are the issues, what do they mean, how will they affect your life? If you want to know those things, you have to come to Free Speech TV, which is, unfortunate in a large sense for the United States. I mean, I would love to see the rest of America actually having news. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool that we've got this little corner of the media universe here in the United States that presents good, solid, vetted, fact-checked, real news. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and help out Free Speech TV. This is it's a really important time. And I mean, not that there haven't been other important times. And I noticed we brought in, as I recall, around $3,000 on Monday and around $5,000 on Tuesday. Typically, we shoot for $10,000 a day and usually hit around $8,000. So we're way down. I'm guessing that's probably because a lot of you have been chipping in to help people with the hurricanes and the floods and the wildfires and everything else. I mean, there's so many needs out there. I honor that. But that said, Free Speech TV is an important thing too. We have a set of premiums for your gifts. With an $80 gift, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and Ben Cohen's anti-Big Pharma money stamp. With a $120 gift, you get Mike Papantonio's new legal thriller, Law and Vengeance, along with the water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. With a $240 gift, you get 2 books. This is They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. With a $360 gift, you get 3 books. You get Law and Vengeance, you get They Thought They Were Free, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and anti-pharma stamp. Anti-pharma, yeah. And plus you get an autographed copy of my book, Unequal Protection. That's with a $360 gift. With a $480 gift, you get Nancy McLean's book. This is just an absolutely amazing book, Democracy in Chains. It is, in my opinion, one of the best books that's been written this year. It's about the right wing and how they've basically, the corporate right wing, the billionaire right wing, and how they have risen up and essentially taken over our government at levels from local all the way up to federal.
And it's really remarkable. So you get that book, plus you get the other 3 books: On Equal Protection by me, They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. Plus you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. And with a $1,000 gift, we'll figure out a way to get together for lunch. Louise and I are going to be spending much of our time, some of our time in Portland, some of our time here in D.C. So, we'll work it out. But that's with a $1,000 gift. Maybe you want to come to Portland. I mean, it's a beautiful town if you'd like to visit Portland. Here's your excuse. So that's that. Those are the goodies essentially that we're offering at those price point levels. But you can donate anything. I mean, if $80 is too high a lift for you, you can call up and make a $10 donation right now, and just to help the network. That's a good and noble thing. Operators are standing by, as they say. And in fact, it may not even be operators. It may be people who work at Free Speech TV who are answering the phone for you. The number is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And, please call now. This is just such an important network to keep going. And it does cost money to get the electrons, to provide the lights, to send this image to you up to the, we have to send it from here to Denver, and then Denver up to the satellite, and then the satellites, both Dish and Direct and off to cable systems, they pull it off the satellite too. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay, when we talk on the telephone, and when you pick up your phone, you're not yet on TV, but you're live. But it's just an amazing thing, but it costs money. So please call now and help out. Thank you so much.
All dip.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the program. This is Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Tom. You can find my program, The Zero Hour, at patreon.com/The Zero Hour, or at thisisthezerohour.com. We are taking your calls this hour, so come on in. We've been talking about Social Security and as a concept and a philosophy, as well as a bill. We've been talking about Bernie Sanders and the Medicare for All Act. We've been talking about lots of stuff, including my starting off the show with a very socialistic sounding quote from Abraham Lincoln about the value of labor. We talked a lot about that. So, hey, call us about anything you want to call about. And before I take a couple more calls, little news item from the other day. Donald Trump, who some of you may still have difficulty absorbing this fact, he's the president of the United States. I know my brain wants to reject that idea like a bad transplant, but nevertheless, he is the president of the United States. And President Trump called upon the Congress to repeal the estate tax. Now, let's put that in a little context. The estate tax is already not levied on estates below $5.49 million. So in other words, unless someone who is a millionaire several times over dies, to all intents and purposes, we have no estate tax in this country. The estate tax used to be considerably more meaningful, but it is gone. As a net result, wealthy, very wealthy individuals who have done nothing to earn their money pay virtually no taxes on it. They do pay no taxes up to the first $5.5 million, whereas somebody working, middle-class person working for a living is likely to pay taxes, will certainly pay payroll taxes on the very first dollar. So that is where we are now. But even this generous posture towards the wealthy is not good enough for the oligarchs Mr. Trump represents, who are his true constituency. So Donald Trump is calling to repeal it. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities ran the numbers. We already know that roughly 1 estate in 1,000 is covered by the current tax, but we also know that that includes some billionaire estates, which is why there are all sorts of tricks for evading the current estate tax altogether. We should be closing those loopholes instead of eliminating the tax. We should be lowering that number a little bit, okay? We can talk about how much, but they ran the numbers. For example, in Alabama, 1 family in 1,000 will pay this tax. Sometimes it goes up to 2 families in 1,000, like in Maryland. But it is a very, very low number indeed. And yet, you know, Democrats will look at this. Some of my Democratic friends will look at this and say, hey, I can't believe that working people were dumb enough to vote for this guy. To which my admonition to Democrats is, how did you lose to this guy? Democrats, we have to tighten our game and do better. Now let's talk to some of our callers. I am pondering now let's just take them in order. David is in Pittsburgh, California, and he wants to talk about Bernie's bill. David, you're on the air. Callers, I am pondering now. You know, David, you got to turn off your radio. David is in Pittsburgh, California, and he wants to talk about. David, listen to your phone and not your radio. Okay, that's not going to work. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, Pete in Espanola, New Mexico. Pete, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
I'd like to talk about Medicare. I'm a Medicare recipient. I had to work my last 2 years at an employer because I had to work so that I could get Medicare. I was on the liver transplant list for 2 years. That was the worst 2 years of my life. Anyway, what I'd like to say is, if we're going to have Medicare for all, we're going to have to pay for it, of course. And the only way to get pay for it is to tax the rich. I mean, come on, let's face it. They're the only ones that have money, and that's the only place to get it. So let's go ahead and go back to like it was in the 1950s and have 96% tax on the wealth. Sure, I agree with that.
Well, 93 to be. Let's not get greedy here, Pete. It was just 93. Good point. Okay, you know, a couple thoughts about that, Pete. Number one, the bill specifies where the money comes from. There is indeed a wealth tax that's part of it. Number two, there's also a tax on the biggest Wall Street, a tax, TAS, not a tax, not attacking, a TAX, a tax on the biggest Wall Street banks, although I'm okay with attacking the biggest Wall Street banks too. And there are a couple other sources for this as well, getting the offshore profits that corporations aren't paying taxes on, doing one-time tax on them. So there are a number of sources. But yeah, in principle, the wealthy in this country are getting a tremendous deal. I've written about what I call the Elvis Index, because during the 1950s, Elvis Presley's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who it turns out was not a colonel and was not named Tom Parker, but called himself Colonel Tom Parker, said to the press, he said, I consider it my patriotic duty to keep Elvis in the 90% tax bracket. Well, good for him, and I consider it my patriotic duty to see that there is, if not a 90% tax bracket, something a lot more reasonable and closer to the 1950s than what we have today. You know, when Rick Perry and people like that, Rick Perry, when he was running for president, used to talk about, I want to go back to the America that I grew up in the 1950s. My answer was always, great, Rick, let's start with taxes. Now, we have a couple minutes left before we go to break. So I'm going to say maybe we'll take a quick call from David in Pittsburgh, California. I keep putting my finger in the wrong place here. Okay, David, you're on the air.
Okay, let me mute my telephone here.
Okay.
Okay, the question I have to ask you, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Because I got my TV muted.
Okay, good. I can hear you, and if you can hear me, we're going to use up to 2 minutes with this, but okay. Yeah, well, what's up?
Simple question. Bernie introduced the health care for all bill
Right.
in the Senate chamber Wednesday.
Yes.
Hang on.
Yeah.
My question is, God bless it, he keeps tell him to stop interrupting. My question
You know,
to
I think you're
is,
listening to the wrong device here because you're hearing things when I'm not talking.
why did he not introduce the bill on the Senate floor where it would have more control of the bill?
Well,
the other thing is, when I get the indication that the Senate is filibustering this bill by different programs they're trying to push ahead of his bill, like the defense bill, the economics bill, and all these other things. I will take your call offline and listen to you on the TV. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Well, the answer here is, first of all, callers, make sure there's no feedback or anything going on. Secondly, the answer is the bill was rolled out. It was announced the other day. It's not going to get, look, the Republicans, it's not going to get passed. We know that because Republicans control the Senate. So what we've got here instead is we got a bill that will serve as a model and shape the debate going forward. They're not going to, they're not going to allow it to come to a vote. Here's the great thing about this bill. Okay, number one, where Bernie couldn't get co-sponsors 3, 4, 5 years ago, whenever it was, 4 years ago, he's now got 1/3 of Senate Democrats signing on as co-sponsors for it. That's a huge political shift, and that's very, very important. It means that a number of Democrats are reclaiming their political tradition and coming up with something really constructive. They're not shy to say there are some things government does well, and providing health care is one of them. Two, now you've got people like the President of the United States, Donald Trump, having to react to this. And Republicans at some point are going to have to answer why they're not willing to provide health care to every single American every resident of this country as a human right, because health care is a human right. It's shifting the terms of the debate. So Bernie is doing a terrific thing here. He's laying out. We are now talking about this. We weren't talking about it before. For now, one of the problems Democrats made for a long time, and we saw it in the primary campaign this year, they would always brag about, well, I can work with the Republican Congress better than my opponent can. Well, that's a fool's errand, okay? Because you're not going to get anything meaningful out of the Republican Congress. You're not even going to be able to do much damage control. I don't want Democrats who brag about how they'll negotiate with the Republicans in Congress. I want Democrats who will kick out the Republicans in Congress and give us a Congress that can get something good done for a change. The way to kick the Republicans out is by standing for something. This is an example of Democrats standing for something. And by the way, we've had so many Democrats talk about the art of negotiation and compromise as if it were an end in itself. Sure, you got to negotiate and compromise. I get that, but it begins when you say what it is you stand for and you go before the voters. The purpose of a democracy is to give people a choice. So let the Republicans go out there with their fanatical, right-wing, corporate, bought and sold extremism, and let the Democrats go out there and say, this is how we're going to make your lives better. Give voters a choice. And then if Republicans retain political power, sure, negotiate with them, but negotiate from a position that means something. Negotiate from a position that says, I want every American to have health care. I want every American to have financial security. I want people who work for a living to be not impoverished, but making a decent wage. That when you stand for something, people will vote for you. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. We'll be back after this. I'm Richard R.J. Eskow for Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Tom. Stick around, and we will be back. All right, everybody, we are back. Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Tom, and I thought I might take a couple calls. A couple more calls for the moment. Let's talk to John in Sparks, Nevada. John, you are on the air.
Thank you very much. I called just some time ago, and when I got the phone call connected, I immediately turned the sound down on Free Speech TV, which is where I watched the Thom Hartmann show.
You're a pro. You're a pro, John.
Listening to the program on my telephone, and a very interesting program. You're to be complimented for your ability to sit in for Tom. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
The subject I want to bring up is called the Electoral College. Watched Rachel Maddow interview Hillary last night. That for an hour, great show. The word Electoral College was never mentioned, and it rarely is on any other program. And it seems to me, until we face up to the fact that we have we have Trump as a president because of the Electoral College. Without the Electoral College, he would not, because he didn't get the most votes. Hillary got the most votes. Why don't we have popular election of presidents, and why do we need to have an electoral college at all? That's my question to you.
Well, that's a perfectly reasonable question, John, and I tend to agree with you. We don't, in fact, I absolutely agree with you. We should get rid of the Electoral College. Look, the Electoral College is an artifact of a bygone era, all right? And when this country was first formed, the states were, state is a synonym for nation, right? Among other things. We use it to mean what other countries call a province. But we were really thinking of the colonies, the original 13 states, as much more independent than of each other than they have turned out to be as this nation has evolved. So we had an Electoral College largely to address that concern. The fact is, I would argue that the United States Senate is not a very democratic institution either. A vote in California or New York is worth far less than a vote in Wyoming, for example. That doesn't seem reasonable to me either. But certainly the Electoral College, I think, has outlived its purpose. And also, for that matter, our whole system of primaries, the fact that each party has primaries in certain states that have disproportionate influence over who the nominee gets to be in a two-party system. We really need to reform our entire electoral process. That's why I was a little upset to see a few Democrats talking about quote-unquote Hamilton electors in the last election, hoping that the Electoral College would somehow revolt. No, let's do away with the Electoral College. And by the way, Alexander Hamilton, it's a great musical, but he was not a big fan of democracy, okay? And he would have been appalled at the idea of direct democracy. But we've reached the point in our history where the people should select their leaders not based on where you live. That said, the Democrats did know we were running this election under an electoral college system, so they could have done a little better in targeting. But let's get rid of the Electoral College. I'm with you, John. We will be right back after this. I am Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Thom Hartmann. It's Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann again. Let's do this. Let's talk to, it's going to have to be quick, but Rob Sandera in Guys Mills, I think that's Guys Mills, Pennsylvania, about propaganda against socialism. Rob, you're on the air.
Okay, I just want to say thank you, all you guys over there, for the show. I really enjoy it. What I wanted to bring up was how to pay for Bernie's system. And first, let me say, Social Security is the security of the social well-being of the United States. and people should fight for it with their life because it's their money, and it was used by J.P. Morgan in the Federal Reserve System. They've made a mint off of your money. Okay? Now, my plan, I told Bernie to put full coverage in this plan. My neighbor told me that what I'm introducing is based off what Spain's doing, and Spain has the greatest health care in the world. We pay for it by, I'm contacting doctors in Cleveland Clinic and major hospitals. I want the doctors and 2-year medical professionals to be considered like veterans of the United States, where we don't tax them and we give them a benefit package so that they give excellent care to every one of our citizens. I want to get this country healthy. And for those that don't know me, I'm the presidential candidate that is going to slaughter the next election by 97%.
Okay, well,
All
good.
I do is work on this stuff.
Okay, well, good luck with that stuff, Rob Sandera. I guess a couple thoughts. One, I certainly agree with Rob that Social Security is essential to the well-being of our society. A stable society, a secure society is a healthy society, and it's one that is less likely to be disrupted by political or civil unrest, including the rise of extremist nationalism. Look, when people are financially insecure, they sometimes, it's human nature. I don't approve of it. I don't like it. Few of us do. But it is human nature for people, some people, to turn to ugly ideas and extremist ideas. We've seen this in virtually every country on earth. We've seen it in Greece with the rise of the Golden Dawn group, which is a proto-fascist, ultra-nationalist group. We've seen it in France with the rise of the Le Pen nationalist folks, who fortunately were defeated in the last election, unfortunately by a financial neoliberal, but nevertheless, they were defeated, and that's good. We've seen it with the right-wing extremists in Great Britain, going back to Enoch Powell in the post-war era. And we're seeing it in this country. We saw it with Father Coughlin in the 1930s. We're seeing it with Donald Trump and some of his more extremist followers now, including the Nazis and neo-Nazis and nationalists on the street in Charlottesville. So, yes, I think it's very well put to say that Social Security is part of our social well-being. As far as health care is concerned, I think, Bernie's got it right. We need a universal health care system. Every other developed country has it. We have it by paying fair and adequate rates to doctors and hospitals, and that's, I think, where we need to go. We will be back after this. I'm Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Thom Hartmann. Please stick with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Tom. Stick around. We've got more.
Thom Hartmann here for Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV is a vital part of our media infrastructure. You've heard me say it a million times. I'll say it again. There is such a lack of good, clean, honest reporting and commentary in the American media scene because all of our corporate media has gone to a exclusively for-profit infotainment model rather than the old nonprofit news model that existed pre-1987 when Reagan ended the Fairness Doctrine. Before 1987, news agencies typically lost money for their parent companies because the news was the price of the station license. Now they all make money. You know, Les Moonves famously said, Donald Trump may be terrible for America, but he sure is great for CBS. I'm paraphrasing from memory, but words to that effect, as you'll recall. He was the president of CBS, or the CEO, or whatever his title is. And this has created a real mess for all of us, you know, trying to understand what's going on in the world, because all the news is either sports, who's ahead, who's behind, or drama, you know, who's agonizing, and or who's happy, or who's winning, who's losing, that kind of stuff, rather than what are the issues, what do they mean, how will they affect your life. If you want to know those things, you have to come to Free Speech TV, which is, you know, unfortunate in a large sense for the United States. I mean, I would love to see the rest of America actually having news. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool that we've got this little corner of the media universe here in the United States that presents good, solid, vetted, fact-checked, real news. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and help out Free Speech TV. This is it's a really important time. And I mean, you know, not that there haven't been other important times. And I noticed we brought in, as I recall, around $3,000 on Monday and around $5,000 on Tuesday. Typically, you know, we shoot for $10,000 a day and usually hit around $8,000. So we're way down. I'm guessing that's probably because a lot of you have been chipping in to help people with the hurricanes and the floods and the wildfires and everything else. I mean, there's so many needs out there. But you know, I honor that. But that said, Free Speech TV is an important thing too. We have a set of premiums for your gifts. With an $80 gift, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and Ben Cohen's anti-Big Pharma money stamp. With a $120 gift, you get Mike Papantonio's new legal thriller, Law and Vengeance, along with the water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. With a $240 gift, you get 2 books. This is They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. With a $360 gift, you get 3 books. You get Law and Vengeance, you get They Thought They Were Free, you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and anti-pharma stamp. Anti-pharma, yeah, and plus you get a copy, an autographed copy of my book, Unequal Protection. That's with a $360 gift. With a $480 gift, you get Nancy McLean's book. This is just an absolutely amazing book, Democracy in Chains. It is, in my opinion, one of the best books that's been written this year. It's about the right wing and how they've basically, the corporate right wing, you know, the billionaire right wing, and how they have risen up and essentially taken over our government at levels from, you know, local all the way up to federal. And it's really remarkable. So you get that book, plus you get the other 3 books, Unequal Protection by me, They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, and Law and Vengeance by Mike Papantonio. Plus you get the Free Speech TV water bottle and the anti-pharma stamp. And with a $1,000 gift, we'll figure out a way to get together for lunch. Louise and I are going to be spending, you know, much of our time, some of our time in Portland, some of our time here in D.C. So, you know, we'll work it out. But that's with a $1,000 gift. Maybe you want to come to Portland. I mean, it's a beautiful town if you'd like to visit Portland. Here's your excuse. So that's that. You know, those are the goodies essentially that we're offering at those price point levels. But you can donate anything. I mean, if $80 is too high a lift for you, you can call up and make a $10 donation right now, and you know, just to help the network. That's a good and noble thing. Operators are standing by, as they say, and in fact, it may not even be operators. It may be people who work at Free Speech TV who are answering the phone for you. The number is 877-378-8669. 877-378-8669, and you know, please call now. This is just such an important network to keep going. And it does cost money to get the electrons, to provide the lights, to send this image to you up to the, you know, we have to send it from here to Denver, and then Denver up to the satellite. And then the satellites, you know, both Dish and Direct and off to cable systems, they pull it off the satellite too. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay, you know, when we talk on the telephone, and, you know, when you pick up your phone, you know, you're not yet on TV, but you're live. But it's just an amazing thing, but it costs money. So please call now and help out. Thank you so much.
And we are back. It's Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann, and we are taking your calls on a Friday afternoon. Let's talk to Paul in Woodinville, Washington. He has thoughts on the term neoliberalism, Paul, which we mentioned earlier. Paul, you're on the air.
I do, and thank you, Richard. I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk with you because I listen to the Zero Hour pretty much every week.
Excellent.
And yes, you use the term neoliberalism, and it drives me nuts, and I'll tell you why. I think the term is misconstrued, and unless you happen to be a political science or economics major, it doesn't really apply. People don't know what it means, and all people hear is liberal.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, and I'll give you a great example. My 88-year-old mom, who is a lifelong Democrat and considers herself to be a liberal, I was trying to explain neoliberalism to me, and she said, "What, now liberal is bad?" I said, "No, Mom, neoliberal." She goes, "Well, what is that?" I said, "Well, it's like laissez-faire government, austerity, privatization, anti-work, right to work, anti-union." And she said, "Well, that's the Republicans." I said, "Yeah." So when it has a negative connotation, I said, "But people are calling the Clintons neoliberals." Richard does, and Barack Obama. And she said, "Well, who was I supposed to vote for? Bush or Dole or McCain or Romney or Trump?" I said,
no, I get your point, Paul.
She said, "Well, what was my alternative?"
Right.
So,
Go ahead.
Okay, so, and now even the conservative talk radio is saying, "Well, even the liberals are admitting that these neoliberals, the Clintons and Obama, these policies were failures." And you know who I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about Rush, he's the guy who once referred to me as the poor, deluded Mr. Eskow, which I'm thinking of making my Twitter bio, by the way. But
they'll twist it. They'll twist anything.
Yeah, sure they will.
Talking about classical liberalism and we're all liberals, even the Republicans. In terms of classical terms, we're all liberals.
Yeah, but all right,
all
okay.
Western society is liberal.
All right, so I got a few thoughts about that, Paul, and I appreciate you bringing it up. First of all, and I say this with tongue-in-cheek, okay, as a professional political communicator, you do have to kind of target to your audience, okay? 88-year-old mom is not necessarily the person you want to throw around the term neoliberal with it. I say, by the way, my mom is 94, okay, and long-time lefty, lifelong lefty, but I wouldn't necessarily throw neoliberal at her either. Look, haters got to hate. Those guys are always going to twist and distort everything. Neoliberalism, as you probably know, well, first of all, it's derived from, classic economic liberalism, which we think of as conservative and so on. But, one thing that bugs me is when people say neoliberalism is a term that doesn't mean anything. You're not saying that, but people do say that. Neoliberalism is a term that people have used for themselves, and there is an essay defining neoliberalism by a neoliberal. It was written by Charles Peters, the founder of the Washington Monthly in the 1980s, and it laid out exactly what neoliberalism is. So if you're talking to a politically more savvy crowd, at times you can use the term. Maybe I shouldn't have on the show. I don't know, but I felt I could work with it because neoliberalism is basically that school of Democratic Party thinking that says the best way to enact programs that work is by privatizing them. And in the words of Hillary Clinton, she said, what I really want to do, she said this was written in an interview in the New Yorker, what I really want to do is marry the public and private sector. And it goes back to, Bill Clinton's initiative to reinventing government and all this, the idea that somehow business does things more efficiently than government. Well, I've worked in corporations and in business. I've worked in government. They don't do things more efficiently. They do things differently for different ends. So the notion that, for example, Social Security's $2.7 trillion trust fund should be turned over to private investors. That's a neoliberal idea that I don't support. Okay, the notion that Affordable Care Act is a neoliberal program originally proposed in large part by the Heritage Foundation. The idea that private sector health insurers would compete for a better outcome, it's not work. They can't do the job as well as the government can. There are some things government does better. So the pushback to neoliberalism is we have somehow fetishized or made a fetish of the magic of the private sector. It doesn't do things that great. If you want to see a real bureaucracy at work, try calling Comcast and asking them to explain your bill to you. Okay, you'll get the bureaucratic runaround like you wouldn't believe. So, the notion of pushing back against neoliberalism is that whole group of Democrats, the Democratic Leadership Council and so on, they were wrong about the magic of the private sector. We need government to do some things, and government does those things very well. It does Social Security very well. It does Medicare very well. We need to stick with what works, and we need to recognize that government has a role to play in our society. That's one of the reasons I'm excited about Bernie Sanders' bill, the Medicare for All bill, is because it shows us what government can do. And in doing so, yes, I would say that's a pushback against neoliberalism, or we could call it the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. Maybe that's terminology people would understand better. And if I were going to bring it up to my mom, if she were well enough, I would, God bless her, I would probably not use the term neoliberal either. But thanks for your call. I appreciate it. And, let's see. Let's go on and talk about, wow, I'm really not mastering this system at all. Julie in Ithaca, not far from my hometown of Utica, wants to talk about the Equifax data breach. And since we haven't talked about that, let's talk to Julie. Julie, you there?
Progressive Talk Radio.
Julie, turn off your radio.
I'm not on the radio. I'm on my home phone.
Okay, because I was hearing something there. How are you doing? How are you?
Well, I'm very excited to be online here or talk to you. I want to tell you first off, it's very hard to access Progressive Talk Radio. And Tom has talked about that. We used to have a very easy access in Ithaca, New York. Now, basically, I get online, I try to connect, and through Sirius Radio. But I'm very concerned about the access problem. And my point about Equifax breach, I think there's a solution that should be on Equifax. And that is basically our data. Well, why are we contacting them and giving our basic data that was stolen back to them that was already stolen? My thought is that they should already freeze every one of our accounts and then ask you, contact us at their expense. Do you want to be on this, freeze? If not, then no. But otherwise, every single one of us should be already protected, not us calling them. But I'm sure I'm not alone on the hassles about contacting to try to freeze my accounts.
No, you're absolutely not. I agree with you 100%, Julie. And, I think that one of the things that we're increasingly becoming aware of is that corporations have way too much power, and we give that power to them. So, for example, political scientists or economists call it political economy, but that's just a fancy way for saying corporations have too much political power, okay? Because they have too much political power, they're allowed to form monopolies that have unfair control of our lives, and we aren't able to fight back. So, look, if you miss a payment on a credit card bill 4 years ago, Equifax is going to cause you pain. But Equifax already lost our data once. They had warnings back in March that there was a vulnerability here. They did nothing. They were negligent. And now we're supposed to go to all the trouble. We're supposed to bear the burden. They pay no price. They don't have to compensate us. That's one of the huge issues with Equifax. And that's why I was happy to see for example, that the Democrats, when they put out their so-called better deal, I had criticisms and have criticisms of it, but I was glad to see that they were talking about monopoly power, because they should be talking about monopoly power and how these governments, how these corporations, Freudian slip there, are running our lives. But secondly, the other thing, so, you know, it's always heads, I win, tails, you lose with these guys. You know, they take our money, they have the power. In Equifax's case, they can determine whether we can afford a house or not. But when they go wrong, it's somehow still on us. That's one big piece of it. The other is the power of big data, which is a terrifying thing in this country right now. Big data, you know, the data that they collect on us and the ways they use it, we don't fully even understand as a society, whether it's Facebook and what they know and don't know, whether it is these corporations like Equifax, but they're determining our fate. You know, your Equifax, your credit rating determines what level of interest you pay. So they have the, or whether you can even buy something. So they can decide whether you can afford a car, whether you can afford a house, and that's got people cowed and terrified so that they're afraid to push back on some of this stuff. Why should Equifax and the other two companies in this line of business, why should they have that kind of control over our lives? Who gave them that right? In a democratic society, who looks over their shoulder? Who makes sure they're not abusing their power, as we now know Equifax has been? So, you know, excellent point, Julie. I thank you for calling, and I thank you for bringing it up. So we're going to go on to the next caller now, but let's see. Okay, let's talk to Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Bill, you are on the air.
Yeah, hi. One big deal that nobody ever talks about is what's to come of the health insurance companies in the future. We've already decided they're immoral, that they don't do anything. They've never cured a disease. All they do is skim money off of every transaction between a physician and his patient. But they represent a huge part of the economy, the trillions of dollars, and that much mountain of money has a lot of power. I feel what we have to do is offer them incentives. I hate giving out subsidies, but they should be made to turn their industry into real health care, which is by financing teaching colleges, putting their money into research, putting their money into curing diseases, whatever is necessary. There's so much money there. And unless we address that, they're not going to go quietly into the night. You know, they're going to keep fighting us. So we have to have a comprehensive idea of what to do with the insurance companies. Otherwise, it's going to be a war of attrition for the next couple of decades. And that's not smart.
Well, you know, I guess I would say to you, Bill, that, you know, there's a lot about, look, the healthcare economy in this country is a $3.4 trillion economy. It's gigantic, okay? And so we're going to have to figure out going forward what we do with that economy. Are we going to, you know, and I think everybody recognizes it's not a simple one-off task, but, you know, I think the best way to look at it maybe is to say that, you know, health insurance companies are capital and they're people. Okay, they're those two things. Yes, they're going to fight us on this. Yes, we're going to have a battle on their hands. That's mostly going to be the people holding the money. The people doing the work, there will be jobs for most of them. Some of them, the executives and the managers, may not have the skill set we need in the new healthcare economy. But look, the economy overall will prosper and grow if we have a more rational healthcare system. There will be job opportunities for everybody if we do this the right way. So what we're really saying is we can no longer allow such an enormous amount of the economy to be managed, or in this case, mismanaged by a few people amassing enormous wealth at everyone else's not only expense, but at the expense of everyone else's health. I mean, I think that's a huge deal when it comes to health insurance. Now, talking a little bit more about what the Bernie Sanders bill would do, and by the way, it's also, thanks to co-sponsorship, it's also the Kamala Harris bill. It's also the Elizabeth Warren bill. It's also the Cory Booker bill. It's also the Al Franken bill. It's also the Christian Gillibrand bill, and so on. What this bill would do is it would phase in the transition. So I know this is not what Bill was talking about, but those people who want to, I got a little microphone problem here. Those people, I'll hold it up. How's that? No, I won't. Okay. Those people who want to, those people who are really concerned about transition should know that there's a 4-year transition built into this bill. It starts with, nothing I can do. Okay. It starts with, I think, over 55s and children. It goes on to insure other groups incrementally from there. And by the way, it's incremental by its very nature, because already under our current healthcare economy, a lot of people don't know this, but about 40% of all health insurance is paid for by government right now, whether it's state government, through a Medicaid, federal government. So we're really talking about transitioning that 40% in 4 steps or so up to maybe close to 100%. Now, after we do that, by the way, there'll be no law against private health insurance insuring things that aren't covered by Medicare for All. So that might include, some forms of alternative medicine or what have you. But yes, they will have to transition, but it will be to everyone's good. Stick around. We'll come back after this. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And we are back on the Thom Hartmann Show. We got a little bit more to talk about. We can take at least one more call. I'll tell you what, let's take it from Brenda in Madison Heights, Virginia. Brenda, you are on the air.
Yes, thank you. I have a question that I'm going to pose, but I want to make a statement before you answer it. And I do want to thank you for the information that you just gave about Bernie's bill. That's very helpful. I'm going to ask you if you can explain the difference to me between single payer and public option. And then what I want to, my statement is, when Bernie is talking about raising taxes and giving everybody insurance, which I think is so critical, we know that the American public has a very short attention span. And so when he's saying raise taxes, I have people turn me off when I try to encourage them to just look at Bernie's bill. And I find that really frustrating, because we know that the Republicans are always going to talk about, we're going to cut your taxes. And here Bernie is saying, we're going to raise them. If he could just say, right now, we're paying $65 billion. On my bill, we'll be paying $45. This is what it really means. Okay.
I think that's exactly right, Brenda. And people on this show wouldn't necessarily know it, but I was the lead writer on Bernie's presidential campaign. We talked about this a lot. It's a very important point. First of all, public option versus single payer. Single payer says that there is one payer for all basic health insurance in this country, and that is the government. That's what we call single payer. The public option was under the Affordable Care Act. The idea was maybe people could have the option of buying into the Medicare system instead of buying their health care from private insurance companies. So that was just a percentage of the population. Single payer covers everybody. That's the difference. As to the messaging, the way we put it in the campaign, the way Bernie likes to talk about it is what you said, but taken down to the individual level. If you were listening to the conversation earlier with Nancy Altman, actuaries say that the average family of four pays $11,000 a year out of pocket for their health insurance in this country. Now, back when we did the numbers on Bernie's original proposal in 2016, it was going to be about $5,000 in taxes, but they wouldn't pay the $11,000. So that's a savings of $6,000, right? I mean, that per household on average. So, one good way to talk about it is to say, we're going to save you $6,000 a year. The numbers may shift now because this is a different bill, but whatever the number turns out to be, and by the way, because healthcare costs out of pocket are jumping really fast, so it's probably more than $11,000 now. So one good way to talk about it when you talk about it with people is to say you're going to save at least $5,000-$6,000 a year when this comes to pass. So instead of paying $11,000 in insurance premiums, and maybe if you got employer-sponsored coverage, they take it out of your check, and instead of taking, all those copays and deductibles, we're going to save you a lot of money with a little bit of taxes. So I am Richard R.J. Eskow, sitting in for Thom Hartmann. And are we going to be back? We're going to be back. All right. And we are back for the last time. This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann, and I love the show today, and I love the fact that thanks to Bernie Sanders and his 16 co-sponsors, we're talking about something progressive. We're talking about something that can really help most everybody in this country. We are talking about Medicare for all. We're talking about the concept of a secure society and Social Security. We're talking about progressive ideas and not just complaining about the insanity of Donald Trump or the venality of the Republican Party. We're talking about good stuff. And you know what? That's what we should be doing. We should be looking to tomorrow. Look, everybody's been talking about what happened. And I want to talk about what happens next. I want to talk about Medicare for all. I want to talk about ending our involvement in needless wars. I want to talk about a society where economic equality is not destroying the middle class and dooming 43 or 44 million Americans into poverty. I want to talk about every family having sick leave, every parent being able to stay home with a sick child, every family knowing it can take at least one little vacation a year the way we used to do back in the 60s, even if it's just to the mountains nearby. I want to talk about a country that's a humane and decent place to live, where everybody has a vote, where everybody has a voice, where everybody can live the kind of fulfilling life they were meant to live, where everybody can get the college education they want if they want it. And that's the society we're going to be fighting for. Thanks for letting me sit in. This is Richard R.J. Eskow for Thom Hartmann.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina,
and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeats.com.